a network of 20 social enterprises. It's community-owned, and they work mostly in field of tourism, like accommodation, hotels. They have bike parks, cafes, pubs, hotels, and it is Welsh. It's the language central, like Welsh language is central in their activities, and their work is provides employment for local people and a lot of opportunities for young people to have fun and develop culture in their own language. Okay, now I'm going to go. Okay, it doesn't work now. Let's do it again. Pasa. Sorry. Let's do it then.
Cosas en directo.
Well, I'm going to continue speaking. Now we are going to continue with the 4 Basque cases, Euskera. Well, it's changing the... Well, I can do the Catalan first. Okay, I am going to do the Catalan first since it's the order in the presentation. Yeah. So Catalan has 9 million speakers, which is a lot. And it's spoken in many, well, there you have where Catalan is spoken in the presentation. And there's a really different like societies comprise of the Catalan community, and it's really highly diverse. So the language density is also really diverse in many different territories where Catalan is spoken. But in Catalonia, well, it is official. The language has official status together with Spanish, and 80% declared to be able to speak it. 35% has Catalan as their family language, and 42% have Catalan as their main language in everyday life, together or not with Spanish. Here we have the project Consorci per la Normalització Lingüística, which is a government-based project, and their goal is to introduce Catalan and train in Catalan language professional sectors, and creating spaces for the language beyond the classroom. So they do Catalan language courses and other different activities. And now, to finish, we go with the 4 cases with Euskera. We have really the 4 projects represent really different, not communities, but well, projects or areas in the Basque Country. We have Aiaraldeko Kitzen Factoria, which is based in Aiaraldea in Araba, Errigora, which is based in Nafarroa, Bizi, which is based in Northern Basque Country, Iparralde. ¿Cómo?
¿Cuándo tienes para ir pasando la diapositiva? Que me ha dicho que habéis ido para allí.
Sí, pero sí, no, ahora sí, pero es que antes
no funcionaba. And lastly, we have Olatukop, which it is set, well, mainly in Gipuzkoa. So the different locations of the project are important because language status is not the same in all of the 4. So BC is located in Iparralde, so that means that Basque has no official status. Aiaraldeko Kitzen Factoria and Olatukop are set in Basque Autonomous Community, so that means it is official together with Spanish. But and Errigora is set in Nafarroa in a zone which where where Basque is not fully official, so it has a mixed status. And also the activities that the 4 of them have or develop are very different too. Even though the projects are made around and on in Basque, like Basque is a core value, their developed activities are really, really different. So first of all, Ayala 15 Factoria, it's a space for local agriculture and ecological products, also cultural activities, and also media in Euskera. So yeah. Then we have Errigora in Nafarroa, which their main goal is the food distribution campaigns and supporting the Basque language in those areas which Basque is not really spoken. Also, BC has another more environmental activism and climate justice perspective. Sorry. And to finish, we have Olatukop, which their core activity is transformative social economy, and it has a cooperative of networks within that sector. And yeah, that's all. Jone, you can continue.
No, so maybe we can start with yeah.
For the Catalan case, we missed the second case that will be introduced and explored because Vicent, Climent Ferrando will be talking about the project of the institute in collaboration with the town council and so that's it.
And the one thing for Catalan, there's a little mistake. It's 42 the people who have Catalan as their.
Oh, sorry, because I said 42 and it's 32. Like in my notes I have 42. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
We will change it. Bueno,
Okay.
the guidelines, no?
Okay. So.
Vale, so we can start with the guidelines.
So remember
we change the places.
So when we say the guidelines, this is the first attempt to provide some guidelines for all European, for such European community projects that would like to work the intersections between linguistic sustainability and socioeconomic sustainability. So we have been exploring all these projects, and what we are presenting today is a preliminary attempt for such recommendations. During the next 2 years, we will be further working on the recommendations, and in the final Bilbao event, we will provide the final version of the guidelines.
February 2028.
That's it.
Bilbao.
So you are all invited, by the way. So, okay.
Okay.
Now,
Vicent, si vosaltres.
But
Vale.
Aldea.
Pueblo. Sí, una aldea es una aldea, realmente.
Pro es aldea.
Ah, sí. Eso utiliza más los gallegos. En Galicia sí funciona.
Zona,
Es que son tres.
Uno de estos coches es aquí. Mi esquina es la sur.
¿Tú vas aquí o...?
Voleu aigua? Jo estic bé. Aigua?
Estic bé, sí.
Torre. Donde cabe 7 caben 8. Ahí sí.
No idea.
Ja, però realment tenim només...
Bueno, ara per l'anglès està obert,
Sí.
però si després canvio llengua, no sé si ens...
No, yo lo hago todo con los grupitos.
Cada grup té la seva llengua.
Gràcies.
Esa no puesto suficiente. Okay, so we'll start with the presentation. So first the Catalan case. Vicent, yeah?
Right. Shall I do it in English? Catalan?
In English.
English, right.
It's very, very fast. I think you were all yesterday where I presented the Catalan case, the project, the joint project that we are having with the Barcelona City Council and the Institute for Catalan. Oh, sorry, you can't hear. Right. I was explaining that if you were here yesterday, I will just explain the case of the joint project between the Catalan, the Institut d'Estudis Catalans and the Barcelona City Council. It's a project that started last year, 2025-2026, and the goal is to make Catalan useful and emotional to young people. The project, the main target is young people, but that's the ultimate goal. But the project targets mainly what we call prescribers, those who have a role apart from the education. It's not on education, it's more on leisure and sports, right? So we realize that more and more there is a gap between what happens in school. Catalan is or should be the language of instruction. That's on the one hand, but on the other hand, what happens on the street, especially on leisure and sport and all those activities that take place outside the classroom, is that more and more Spanish is becoming or has become the language, like the mostly used language. So it's seen as the language of utility. It's seen as the language that students, not students, but young people have emotional attachment. So the idea is to focus on what we call prescribers, right? So those who have that role of trainers, of those people that have a role in leisure and sport. It's a complex task. It's a long-term goal. It's not short, because you cannot tell students or young people which language to use, but it has to be emotional. It has to be naturalized in a space that today is not natural. If you saw the data that I showed yesterday, the vast majority of young people use Spanish as their language in leisure and sport. So what we want to do is to reverse that situation and try to make Catalan a natural language also in those spaces. We're going to have also a pilot project in the digital sphere. I don't know if you've heard the game LOL, League of Legends. Do you all know LOL? Yeah. It's for those of you who have kids or who are young enough to know, it's a place where young people cast a match, or it's a game that people cast, what we call casters, right? So what we're going to have for the first time ever in Barcelona, the final, we're going to cast the final. It's a digital video game. It's live from New York. So we're going to have the final casted in Catalan for the first time ever in Barcelona. So why? Because we want, as I said before, we want the language to be emotional. It needs to be taken for granted that the language that will be used is Catalan. We don't have to tell them, okay, come because the language is Catalan, but they will just show up and they'll see that everything is in Catalan. So we are training casters, professional casters, young people. So that's the way we are doing, we are developing the project. The ultimate goal is to have more and more young people use Catalan, but it needs to be done in a very indirect way. So through the role of prescribers. And the project has, it's between the Institute for Catalan Studies and the Barcelona City Council we have the financial support, but also we have many other partners in the project. One of them is el Consorci per la Normalització Lingüística, which focuses on awareness raising and training courses for those prescribers. So I think I would leave it here. It's just a very the highlight of the project. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to reply. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good morning. Egun on, bon dia. I'll focus on two projects of Consorci per a la Normalització Lingüística, which are oriented to local businesses and shops. These projects are, on the one hand, the project that we call Comerços Aprenents, meaning learning shops, and it is like an on-site language training program tailored for local shop workers who speak very, very little Catalan, mainly because they are from places like Pakistan, Morocco, or countries in Latin America, and they cannot attend standard classes in Consorci per a la Normalització Lingüística due to their long work hours. So language officers, language teachers go there and visit these shops to deliver brief and highly practical, highly focused on their job, 15 minutes lessons focusing on this, on customer service and in basic retail vocabulary. So it is like a tailored, the personalized Catalan language teaching for this, for owners of shops which come from other countries and they don't know a lot of Catalan. The other line of this project focusing on local businesses and shops is what we call comerços col·laboradors, which means like collaborator shops. And what we do there is, in this case, the shops are owned by Catalan-speaking people, and we send our students, our Catalan language students, to make language practices there. So it is like a way to make more dynamic the local businesses and for our students to speak Catalan and to practice Catalan. The thing is that until now, these two projects were very focused on the shops and on our students. So the teacher went there and they make this brief 15 minutes lessons, or our students used to go to the collaborator shops to make their language practices. But now what we want to do is making a community turn in these two projects and involve all the neighborhood. For example, involving schools, associations of parents in the schools, associations of different business owners in the neighborhood. So for us, now the unity of action will not be the shop anymore, okay? Because it is not very efficient, for example, that we go there to train the shop owners, and then all the people, all the Catalan-speaking people who go to shop there, they speak to them in Spanish. So this is not efficient. So what we want to do is to involve the people going there to shop through schools, through community associations, through the neighborhood associations. And this is new from this year. And what we expect is that it will have much more impact, these lessons that we do in these shops, if we involve the people buying there as well. So these are the projects, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Just get an idea.
Gòrdan is connected online.
Yeah.
So, have you considered devising some sort of sign that you can put up in the stores, like saying, I'm like, for example, a Pakistani. I'm open to learn interacting in Catalan with customers, something like similar to what they do in the Basque country. Like I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to hear.
Yeah. We don't really like this format, like marking the person, but yes, for the shop. So we are actually designing now posters to say, hello, I'm learning Catalan, please help me to practice. This is for the comerços aprenents, so for the learning shops, and the other ones for the comerços col·laboradors. The text will be something like, if you want to practice Catalan, here you can do it. So yes, we are planning this. We are planning and we will do this.
Okay. So next, Kasia, you want to be the next one?
Yes.
So we'll have 3 cases in the Polonian stake, Wilamowicz, Lenko, and Kashubian.
So are we starting with the Wilamowian case?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, because I have 3 different cases, so I have 3 different notes that we worked on with the communities. I will try to be brief when it comes to those cases, because the communities gave me a lot of guidelines, you know, just so. So starting with the Wilamowian case, this is the one that you might remember, 20, 30 speakers in Poland, West Germanic language. So the first guidelines that the community had or have is to create a stable institution that protects earlier grassroots work and gives activities dignified working condition. And it has to do with the fact that when a community has already developed strong grassroots language and cultural activity, a permanent local institution can protect that work, can reduce activist burnout and make long-term planning possible. So generally, this is not to assume that volunteer activism alone can sustain language activism or language community indefinitely, right? Just talking about this type of maybe continual support. Then the second guideline is to position the language at the center of the institution rather than treating it as an added cultural feature. And in the case of the Wilamowians, this is also something very central because the language is spoken just by a few people. So generally just what happens is that language might be added as an additional thing, you know, just to the museum and just focusing more on the cultural things. But the Wilamowians say, no, the language has to be central rather than just an addition, yeah? Also the Wilamowians say about this guideline is that not to display the language only as an object from the past. So the museum should allow visitors to hear and to encounter the language as a living language rather than something from the past. The third guideline is to design education differently from insiders and outsiders. The Wilamowians propose to develop 2 educational tracks. So one for the external audiences that focuses on the awareness and interpretation, and one for the community itself that focuses on identity, continuity, language learning, and deeper cultural knowledge. So they are stressing that education tracks should not be the same for everyone. There should be one that is directed for the external group and for the ones that are internal, and it has to do with the status of the critically endangered language. The fourth guideline is to use the museum as a community meeting place, not only as an exhibition place. And we are talking about the context of a museum here. So a minority language museum should function as a living community hub where people should meet, learn, speak, create, ask for help, and participate in local life. So this is done not to separate heritage protection from everyday community life, so make it part of a living community. And the final guideline is to link language visibility with local development, tourism, economic benefit while keeping community control. So in this kind of context, the local development should use the minority language as a source of place-based value, but the community institutions should guide how the language and the culture is represented. So that would be the Wilamowian case. If we go to the Kashubian case, let me find the right document. So as I said, as Itzar said, Radio Kashubia it's a radio station in Poland, and as you might remember, there is 177,000 Kashubians in Poland, out of which 87 speakers, 87,000 of Kashubian speakers in Poland. So the first guideline is to make the minority language present in everyday public life, not only in the heritage context. So minority language media should make the language part of ordinary daily life, so morning shows, local news, conversations, music, and everything that the radio does. Do not frame the language as something suitable only for formal education or cultural performance or symbolic identity, because the radio shows that public normalization depends on the language being heard in everyday context. Okay, so number 2 is to use mixed language broadcasting strategically to widen participation while increasing the minority use. So what it wants to say is that where full minority language broadcasting is not yet possible because there is not enough people who speak Kashubian, or to present them, just at broadcasting and the radio, there should be bilingual formats that should be designed to increase the exposure of Kashubians. Because this is also one of the problems of the Radio Kashubia, that sure, there are speakers, but there is not enough people who are presenters for the radio online who are bilingual. So, for instance, they are proposing to pair the ones who speak not that well with the ones who speak well, so to kind of, just increase the representation. Now, number 3 is to build youth engagement through music, performance, media production, and visible career paths. The youth language engagement should be linked to attractive creative industries and public visibility, especially when it comes to youth performance. So to address the youth in a creative way, not just in some way, right? But just to be creative and looking for means to get the youth engaged. And to not expect young people to engage only through school and formal language lessons, because this is what happens. The language is given in schools, but there is no engagement outside. So this is what the radio does. Is they're trying to create this very creative self-expression means to turn language into a source of prestige and opportunity. Guideline 4 is to connect media work with local places, institutions, businesses, and community events. So I think something that everybody stresses all the time, but for the Kashubians, this is very important for the language to function as part of the socio-economic ecosystem So not to only hear the Kashubians in radio or in school, but also outside. Number 5 is to invest in people and digital tools, because minority language media now require both linguistic and technological capacity. For instance, for the Kashubian, they don't have any kind of, just representation in the digital technological tools. So the recommendation that they give is that minority language media requires training pathways for new speakers and journalists, supported by practical digital tools to reduce the burden of producing high quality content. And it has to do with the fact that there should be some kind of training for the technology, for the people to kind of make it all going. Yes, within this context, they explicitly say not to assume that language commitment alone is enough, because the radio Kashube case shows that modern minority language media require professional skills, digital infrastructure, and support for people who are not yet full speakers. So the final case is the case of the Lemko community from southern Poland. As you might remember, about 13,000 people in Poland, about 6,000 speakers. So the Lemko, so Ruska Ursa, because this is the name of the organization, gave a couple of guidelines. Starting with the first one is they say to treat the minority language as a default working language, not only as a symbolic marker. And I think this is something that is being stressed by all 3 cases. So community organizations should maintain protected domains where the minority language is the primary language of use. They might include media and so forth, but do not replace living language with symbolic visibility, because a language that appears only on posters, labels, and heritage products might gain visibility, but it does not become a language of real communication. I think we're going to kind of see a repetition of this in other guidelines, and maybe it's going to be a little bit clearer. So the guideline number 2 is talks about using the minority language strategically to build bridges, but without displacing the minority language. In the past, the Lemko used to be more closed, and to the Polish community, they seem to be a closed-off group. Yes, and now they are trying to kind of bridge between the Polish and the Lemko society. And the Lemko say that the community organization should distinguish between internal language domain and outreach domain. The minority language should remain central for community-directed work, but the majority language can be used as an access language for public education, local dialogue, and broader social recognition. But in this context, they are talking about not making all the materials immediately bilingual. So they are really stressing the Lemko language, but use some part of it to come out to the broader community. Yeah, as I said, there was the Lemko case. The Lemko group was very closed up in the past, but it also has to do with their tragic history in the Polish context. So number 3 is a guideline to build children's and youth activities around belonging, not only about language instruction. So minority language education should be connected to peer networks, creativity, music, media, and so forth, and collective identity, obviously, which for the Lemko is very important. So children should experience the language as a language of social belonging and culture production, not only as an extra school subject. Yes, because generally, as the LEMCO is not taught at school, those are extracurricular activities that the parents bring the children, just outside of the school hours to learn LEMCO, and it kind of becomes as an extra material subject to be taught rather than something that is part of their everyday life. So they are stressing here that it should be taught about belonging. It's not just as a school subject. Then number 4 is to create a physical and digital community hub where the language can be heard, practiced, archived, and socially valued. Local language development should combine physical gathering places with digital infrastructure. A community needs both a place where language meets and media or digital environment where the language circulates beyond the local territory. And they talk about this in the context of measuring, just the success, if you will, of the clicks, right? I mean, just digital media and so forth. So the LEMCO say not to measure success only through those clicks or the media, social media reach or accessibility to the language, but Ruska Bursa, so the LEMCO, they note that reach should be higher in Polish, but the organization's goal is preservation and development of LEMCO, not simply visibility metrics. Yeah. And the final guideline, and I will stop here, I'm sorry, I have 3 cases. So to secure continuity and paid capacity and not only rely on volunteer commitment. So there should be guidelines for local language development that include organizational sustainability. Language work should be funded as skilled labor, not treated as an unpaid activism. So Ruska Bursa explicitly stress that not to design language development programs that depend on enthusiasts alone. The case of the LEMCO shows that commitment can produce major results, but without stable employment and institutional support, it also creates exhaustion and fragility. Thank you very much.
Scottish. Okay. Okay, so.
So now we will present our first intuition from our 4 Basque cases, as Itziar has mentioned them. They are Aiaraldeko Ekintzen Faktoria, Errigora, Olatukop, and Bizi. And rather than presenting them as universal recommendation, we would like to frame them as global intuition that link different contexts, different situations. So we will present 5 recommendations, starting from Jone.
Okay. So the first guideline is that minority language revitalization should begin from community needs and not from language alone. None of the projects we studied emerged as purely linguistic initiatives. Instead, they arose in response to concrete community needs and aspirations. So, for example, in Errigora case, they identified an opportunity connected to the territory. Agricultural products from southern Navarre were largely absent from other parts of the Basque country. And by creating new channels of distribution, the project sought to provide economical support to the local pro-Basque movement and also strengthen local producers, generate economic resources, and build connections between different parts of the Basque-speaking community. So language revitalization became intertwined with territorial development and economic solidarity. Similarly, in Aiaraldeko Ekintzen Faktoria emerged from the perception that the region lacked media, cultural and social infrastructures capable of telling its own story. So they decided to respond to that need in Basque. So they created a media. They started from a media product just in Basque in a very Spanish environment. So that was their choice. They decided to tell the story in Basque. And the first lesson is that language revitalization becomes more powerful when it is embedded within broader community processes and when it builds on existing strengths, resources, and aspirations.
So the second recommendation would be putting the community before the market. It's a quite dense recommendation. All community projects need resources to survive, but however, the Basque experiences suggest that economic sustainability does not necessarily require adopting conventionally market logics. One of the most interesting ideas that emerged from our fieldwork, particularly through Hola Tu Cop, that it's a cooperative of small businesses, was the contrast between a market-centered and a community-centered approach to economic activity. We would like to say that in a conventional market logic, success is often measured through growth, scale, and market share. But the central question here is how many people can we reach? And by contrast, Hola Tu Cop's member repeatedly emphasized a different question. Which community are we serving? One participant summarized this idea very clearly, and rather than asking how many customers they could attract, they asked whom they wanted to reach and what needs has the community. And from this perspective, a small linguistic, that is important, a small linguistic community is not necessarily a limitation. What matters is the existence of strong relationships, trust, reciprocity, and commitment that is related with the core values that ICR also has said, and we will develop them a little after. And this perspective challenges the assumption that minority language projects are economically non-viable because they operate in relatively, between comillas, in small markets. And the Basque cases suggest that projects can be economically sustainable precisely because they operate in a rooted community, the small communities, rather than in anonymous big capitalist markets. That would be the second area, more or less.
So a third lesson would be that concerns organizational sustainability. Across all the cases, we found a combination of professional work, volunteering, activism, community participation. And this project depends on people's commitment, energy, and willingness to contribute. But at the same time, some participants spoke about what could be described as a crisis of participation or militancy. Community projects continue to need volunteers and activists, but contemporary life conditions often make long-term engagement more difficult. So people face increasing pressures on their time, work, and personal lives. So that means that sustainability cannot be understood only in financial terms. Projects need organizational models that allow people to participate without becoming exhausted, and they need mechanisms for sharing responsibilities, distribution workloads, and ensuring that participation remains meaningful and realistic. Closely connected to this is the importance of caring. Several participants stress that community projects are often very good at caring for their language and their territory or their political goals, but sometimes less good at caring for the people who take part on this project and make this project possible. So long-term sustainability therefore requires attention to well-being, mutual support, and collective responsibility.
And linked with this care you have mentioned, the fourth guideline is that language revitalization gains in strength when it is connected to broader social values and collective projects. Across the four Basque cases, language was rarely presented as an isolated objective or object. Instead, it is linked to wider concerns such as feminism, environmental sustainability, territorial development, democratic participation, or social justice or cohesion. And this connection matters specifically because people often participate in community initiatives for multiple reasons at the same time. Some may be motivated by language, but others may be motivated by ecological concerns, feminism, cooperative economics, local development, or social transformation. And in many cases, this motivation reinforces one to another. This is important. This suggests that language revitalization should not be understood only as a linguistic process. It is also social, cultural, economic, and with added political process too. The participants also highlighted the importance of creating spaces for collective reflection and some kind of safe spaces, we will say, because community need opportunities to discuss, to pause, also to think about it, to discuss about language, about power, about inequality and social change together. And this conversation, we think they help people understand why language matters and why it is related to broader social and transformative values. So in this case, the lesson for us will be that that language revitalization itself becomes stronger when it's connected to meaningful and powerful social transformation values.
And finally, the final guideline concerns language itself. So a recurring lesson across the cases is that minority language cannot simply be added onto projects as an afterward. If language is to play a meaningful role, it needs to be incorporated from the beginning and managed throughout the life of the project. So in the project we've been studying, Basc is not simply a communication tool. It is one of the organizing principles around which the project is built. And at the same time, participants also recognize that maintaining this commitment requires constant work. Language does not automatically remain central. It requires planning, resources, attention, and deliberate intervention. However, the fieldwork also revealed an important tension that we would like to share with you. Communities are changing. Migration, demographic change, increasing linguistic diversity are transforming the context in which minority language initiatives operate. And as a result, projects are constantly confronted with difficult questions, such as how can this remain welcoming and inclusive while also protecting minority language spaces? Can a minority language remain vibrant if it survives only with increasingly protected niches? How much openness is possible without weakening the language? And how much protection is necessary without creating exclusion? So this challenge can be described as a constant process of opening and closing spaces. So the key lesson here will be that there is probably no universal formula. The challenge is not to choose once and for all between openness and protection. Rather, it is to develop the capacity to move between them according to the needs of the community and the objectives of the project. So that's all for us. Gòrdan.
Gòrdan, it's your turn.
Vale, barrido. Oi, eta jarri Gòrdan, Andy. Okay. Gòrdan.
You can start. Okay.
Gràcies, escric asko. Bon dia.
No, can't hear you.
You can hear me now?
Okay. Yeah.
Gòrdan, Elin will start because we have some technical problems, so it will be a bit late. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like we don't have any speakers, Gòrdan. That's why we couldn't hear you. Okay. Yeah, this case study in Bro Festiniog, it's an area that is a post-industrial area, extractive economy, slate quarrying. You know, one of the biggest slate quarries probably in the world at one point, you know, at the turn of the 20th century, 19th into 20th century, there was about 15,000 people who lived in this cluster of villages, and nowadays the population is around 4,500, and most of the people 100 years ago or so would have been either working in the quarries or you know, the whole economy of the town and of the villages around was based on that extractive economy. And then also perhaps as some background to the Bro Festiniog social enterprise. They're a network of around 20 social enterprises, and in a small geographic area, you know, with a radius of about 15 kilometers, there's probably one of the most highly dense social community-owned social enterprises, possibly in the UK, but certainly they think that it's one of the most densely populated areas in terms of the number of social enterprises. And their overall assets are to the value of around 6 or 7 million euros. So they built those assets through the social enterprises that they've developed, so community-owned assets of that value. And altogether, they have a turnover that's around 4 or 5 million euro per year. So they employ around 180 people, and they've also got officially sort of 180 volunteers or people who work with the social enterprises either on the boards or that there are regular volunteers in the activities. And as Itziar said earlier, there's a range of different activities, range of different social enterprises, from renewable energy to bar, hotel, shops. Also, they have a social enterprise that focuses on well-being, and this is connected to the point that Jone was making just now about burnout and about looking after yourself and about looking after your mental health, your physical health, your stress, and that you give a lot to the community, but you need to also take care of yourself, take care of each other, and if you have that as a basis, then you can take care of the community. And also, as one background as well, before we go into the points, that the activists who are at the core of Cwmni Bro Festiniog are language activists. The language activist movement in Wales that was started in the 1960s is a language activist movement that has always, since the 1960s, considered language to be a social phenomenon. It's never been a linguistic movement. And I think that sometimes people suggest that we are now discovering that language is a social phenomenon. It is absolutely not a new discovery, please. It drives me mad, actually, to think that we are saying those things in 2026. Language activists know that in order for their language to have a sustainable future, everything around it has to change. Asset ownership has to change. The social conditions of the language have to change. And so political, social, economic factors, we know that these have a direct impact on language transmission, acquisition, use, development. So this activist movement, Cymdeithas yr Iaith, was started in the 1960s by a group of young people. And of course, those people who started the movement are today, you know, in their 70s, in their 80s. And a couple of them were very much involved and are very much involved in Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog. It's based on a political ideology of a kind of Gramscian Freire mix, something like that. And there is a special word or a concept that was developed in the Welsh language, and it's called cymdeithasiaeth, and it kind of means communitarianism. So that's the political ideology behind Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog. So, I've said a few of those things anyway. So these are the guidelines that have come through the work with Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog and through their annual General Assembly. And so we can focus on some of them now. So it's an absolute rejection of nostalgia, an absolute rejection of extractive economies. It's about community empowerment and so on. The social enterprises that are in the umbrella of Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog also came together with other social enterprises across the region, and then they created a network of networks and so on. And that kind of collaborative work is really, really at the foundation. So I've just brought a few examples of the kind of sort of brochures that they've produced. And this one is quite interesting because in the English version it says, "Together we have the potential to prove that we can create strong, sustainable and thriving communities for future generations." In the Welsh version, I'll translate it, but it says something a little bit different. "Through the process of cymunedoli, of communitarianism, we can add additional resources from the economy into our communities, and we can show that our communities are not too small, too poor, or too stupid to create a sustainable future for future generations." So it's a slightly different message perhaps in the Welsh version, but that is very much at the root of the political ideology that is behind the vision. So I think I've covered number 1 and number 2 and number 3. Then we go to this, we're going perhaps a little bit hippie now, right? But this is a direct quote, you know, from the main officer working in Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog, Kerry, who was on the video in the Basque country, and that Fosterlang people will meet in February 27, hopefully. So yeah, if you know, they use the word love, cariad, you know, he used the word love, and the people who are leading the other social enterprises were clearly in agreement with that. It is about love. And I think that this is also part of challenging that paradigm. You know, it's not about money, but yes, we need assets. We don't want to be asset-less because we need those assets, but it is about love. And then this final point, restanza, they picked this up from an Italian political scientist. She's quite young. I think the first name is Desiree. I think Desiree is her first name. Anyway. About restanza, about staying being a dynamic concept. Staying is not going anywhere. It's a decisive act. It's a dynamic act, and that you decide you're not going to emigrate or you're not going to leave the area. You're actually going to stay because you want to invest your time and your energy in that particular place. So it's about looking differently at, you know, life in a holistic way. So yeah, no burnout. So, and power in our hands, that is very much a slogan that's that's used time and again in the different publications. You know, the future is in our own hands. It's about that emancipation. And then, you know, this is one example of what they're going to be doing now with to tackle poverty, energy poverty. So there's a hydroelectric power station in the area, and so they're going to use the water that gets heated through that through the process of creating electricity to then fund energy, renewable energy for the houses. And it's a poor area in terms of GDP, and so you know, in the multiple deprivation index that we have, it comes out in the bottom 10% in Wales. So it's you know, heat poverty is a big issue in that area, and so they're developing a project to tackle that. So power in our hands.
Thank you. Gòrdan.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Any applause should be at the end if it's worth it. Bon dia, Eganon. It's great to see some of you on the video. I'm sorry I can't be there. Unfortunately, it just wasn't possible for me to make it. I think the guidelines that I'm going to discuss today, what I am happy about and heartened about is that so many of you that have spoken previously about the cases across Poland and in Catalonia, in the Basque country, and in Wales, a lot of the recommendations are related, and they're all similar, and they're all coming from the heart, and they're all coming from the people. And this is something that's really important for me, sitting here, removed from you digitally. The first thing I'll do very quickly is just to talk about the two cases, Keolis and Taikeli. So I did my fieldwork with those two organizations, and the recommendations are drawn from those conversations, but also partly from my own experience as a community activist and my own work as a PhD scholar. Keolis has been running for 30 years, so it is sustainable, and it has proven itself to be very successful. It has a good track record of attracting funding. And Taikeli is a much newer initiative which began around the time of COVID 2020, and an understanding that the old gathering, the old tradition of people coming together to sing and share stories was being eroded by modern life. And it was a chance to create a project that would go back to that sort of ideal, but in a modern setting, in a contemporary setting. The first of the guidelines is about probably the most difficult challenge we have in the Scottish Gaelic context, and I guess it's probably similar elsewhere, is creating realistic budgets which ensure that projects can be viable. We have been conditioned in the Gaelic world to think very negatively about our language and about our skills and the culture and the value that exists in those skills and those words. It's something that's held us back for a long time. And I think it's perhaps the most difficult thing to challenge, especially with older people who speak the language first and then speak English afterwards. It came across in the fieldwork that it is not natural for people in the Gaelic world to be confident about their skills. It's a little bit like putting 20 people in one car and then asking them to change places. It can be done, but it's very, very difficult, and it will take a long time, and some people will get hurt doing it. But it's that idea of trying to figure out what you want to pay to your tutors, the ones that have the skills in music, in singing, in dance, in theatre, in writing, in poetry. All of these people have so long been asked to contribute their skills, but without being paid properly. We have to try and change that idea that's internalized. We have value in our skills and we deserve to be paid for it. We've been too unwilling to really recognize the true economic value and how that builds in the community. Nobody is going to help us do that. We have to do that ourselves. So it's an internal thing that has to change. And those two projects recognize that very clearly because they are linked to the people that are providing the skills, the classes, the courses, and how that builds a greater confidence within younger people. And then older people see it and think, we do have a role here. So that's one very important thing. Touching again on something, I think it was Jone that said it, about the importance of linguistic aims and the socioeconomic aims. You have to identify how those go together. Language is something that people want, and they want to support it, and they think it's important. But what a community, especially in a rural area where the population numbers are low, what that community needs is a school, a shop, a post office, a care service, trades like builders and electricians. Those are the things that help a community survive. And if we can build in linguistic projects that help to build skills in these communities that can keep people to contribute to those core services, a little bit like what Elin was talking about there in her presentation, the desire to upskill your community has to be a priority. Linguistic skills can be added into this mix so that our economic aims, how many jobs can you create, how much value can you add, but there are social aims as well, creating those spaces to allow those people to thrive. The Anti-Cayley project had 5 pillars of development: community, economy, tourism, product, and language. And they said to me, the language is as equal. It's not the most important because we need the people who have the skills to do the jobs to keep the community going. They have lots of jobs, but it's hard to fill them and keep people there. So it's sometimes about small steps towards a linguistic goal and a socioeconomic goal making more sense, rather than presenting a huge project and expecting people to try and make that one giant leap. The third one, again, I think Kasia talked about this clearly, understanding the volunteer capacity. What workforce do you have? How many volunteers do you have? And how much can you rely on them, and for how long? The volunteer burnout in rural areas is very, very high. And in Scotland, we have a really challenging demographic picture. We have an aging population. We have a shrinking school-age population. So we will have a big impact on volunteering in the future. In 2040, 2050, 2060, we will not have the people that will be available to teach the classes in the evening. We will not necessarily have the grandparents to teach the grandchildren Gaelic skills when the parents are working. We have a very worrying picture about social care, and socioeconomically, our state pension age is getting older and older and older. And this was something that came up in all of my research. People are worried because women used to retire at 60, but in 2044, I think, the pension age will be 68. So suddenly there is almost a decade lost of potential volunteering skill and effort when people have energy. So we need to go back to the first point and relate it in. We need to build the skills now and build the value now to ensure that there are enough people being paid for their skills that are linguistic, that are cultural. And if people can be paid, and they can be confident in their skills and their capability, they can be enthused to see what they can really contribute. The fourth point is not necessarily about the people that support us, but it's about the non-participants. So it's everybody else in and around the community, in and around the project. The Gaelic language, we are told, contributes anywhere between £80 million and £150 million every year to the wider Scottish economy. So it has a value, clearly. It depends how you calculate it, but we need to be helping people who are on the periphery, the hotels, the accommodation providers, the cafes, the taxi drivers, the bus companies, all of these organizations that help to facilitate cultural events. They need to understand that they can profit and become more sustainable and more successful through facilitating and helping cultural and linguistic events. Again, it comes down to things like Elin was talking about. Asset ownership is massively important. Community land ownership is massively important. If you can control more of these services and assets, you can generate more and more money, which goes into providing cultural enterprises with sustainability. And I think the final one, certainly from my own experience, is about the data collection methodologies that you need to think about when you are going to be building your relationships with your funding organizations. We don't want to think about one little project here and then another project and then another one a year down the line. We need to be thinking more holistically about everything being related and connected. And we want to build effective, friendly relationships with funding organizations, with our enterprise companies, with our local authorities, our local councils. So we need to be very clear as volunteers, as cultural organizations, how we quantify the impact of our projects and how we help to build a true picture, but a positive picture about the impact of how language, whether it's Villamavician, Kashubian, Lemko, Basque, Catalan, it doesn't matter, how all of that impacts on a wider social scale and on a local, intimate scale. So having proper methodologies in place that everybody in your organization understands can reduce time, reduce the burden that is lying on volunteers and staff, and make a more streamlined process possible, which makes the funders and the governments and the local agencies understand the importance of what you're doing. Gracias. Escrigasco.
Doncs, vale, ara passarem a fer el workshop. We will start with a workshop. I think we are 17 here. Yeah.
I mean, the idea is to, okay, so we've been discussing some guidelines. There are a lot of commonalities between them. We have been talking about volunteering, the holistic perspective. So we would like to talk about these guidelines, or discuss these guidelines or others that you, I don't know, for your experience in, for example, in Garavide, or I mean, different organizations, or where we have been working on, and yeah, try to reflect a little bit longer about the guidelines. So we were organizing. Yeah. Danny? Okay, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yes, because we have time.
Questions.
We should, yeah.
Eskerrik asko, Dani.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In order to Gòrdan listen question.
Or come to the front.
Yeah. We thought we could discuss them in small groups, but it's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was really very interesting. I liked it very much. I'm Daniel from Austria. You know me as researcher, teacher, educator, psychologist working with trauma, but I haven't had the chance to introduce myself as activist. so I want to use just 1 minute for it. So since I was 13, 14, I was building Slovene youth organization in my area. So we made a Slovene pupils club, students club later. In Klagenfurt, my city, is the university. We haven't had a students organization for Slovenes. So I tried to build it with my networks. Recently, I'm more into memorial culture activism. We have a lot of fascist, Nazi memorials still, and we protest against it. We try to build more inclusive memorials, and it's still connected to bilingual and Slovene memorial culture. So I can really rely on very much on what you said, and it's very useful. So, for example, I found out for our region, Slovene region in Austria, community places and rooms seem very important because we haven't had a lot of time, places where people just brainstorm, meet, and think about new ideas. And I see then, and this leads me to the first question, I have 2 or 3. So it seems that at one side, we need for minorities this safe space, in which the safe space is, of course, the language which is spoken. But at the other hand, we have to be open to new speakers and open to other speakers. So have you had, from your work until now, some ideas how to challenge this, how to work on this challenge to maintain the speaking of the language, the safe space, and be open to new speakers? Then I see in Austria we have a lot of young minority members who go to Graz, to Vienna, to bigger cities. Of course, this is also modern. So what are your experiences, or have you had experiences with activism outside the traditional area? Minority languages are very often focused on a traditional area where they have rights. But what about young people moving out of the traditional area? Or what if the area is very spread, but you have had examples where the area is very spread? What about activism in a very spread area? This would be the second question. And then how important, from your point of view, is the minority linguistic landscape for all this activism? Thank you very much.
Shall I start? Yeah. In the Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog, we don't have the data yet in terms of when did the people who were involved in the social enterprises, when did they start speaking Welsh? Did they start speaking Welsh in their family or in school or later in life? So we don't have the data on it, but in terms of observation and listening to people speaking, it's clear that some people have learnt it later in life who didn't go to school in the area or who didn't go to a school in Wales. So it's clear that some of the people who were in their 30s who were involved in one of the energy projects and also in the food security project. So it sounds very grandiose, food security. It's just, it was growing vegetables, growing potatoes, but I'm calling it food security for discourse reasons. No. So it was very clear that some of the people would fit the category of new speaker if we use those categories. And then with the other people who were, when they were speaking Welsh, it was clear that they spoke Welsh in their childhood. But when they were speaking Welsh, I suppose it's very similar here in Catalonia or in the Basque country. You can't very often tell if somebody spoke the language in the home or whether they just spoke it in the school. So this is the case in our context, that it's not, that it wasn't clear when they were speaking Welsh whether they spoke it at home when they were small or whether they just spoke it in the school. But when they spoke English, it was more clear in some cases that they actually spoke English at home because they sounded more English when they spoke English. And then the ones who obviously didn't speak English at home sounded a bit more Welsh when they spoke English, but they only said a couple of sentences in English public meetings. So there's a mix of different kinds of speakers in terms of when they acquired the language. Also, they see the language as something that is central to the whole project as well. So it's a means of communication, but it's the carrier of the culture and the social values. So in a sense, there's an expectation that in order to participate, you have to have the open ears, and then you also have to have a flexible mouth as well. So it's built around that the language is an open phenomenon, but with all open phenomena, as an individual, you have to take some action, and as a community, we have to take collective action. So it's open in that sense. But this is an area where 76% of the population can speak it. But that also means that 25% of the population are saying that they can't speak it. So those people tend to be older people who've moved into the area kind of to retire. And so they are possibly less, well, they were visibly less present in the management or in the organization, but perhaps there are some who do some volunteering or who benefit from the projects as well. The publications that they do in Welsh and in English. This is more or less the standard, but trying to make the language as accessible as possible. With activism outside the areas, activism in our case is across the whole country in the higher density speaker areas and in the lower density speaker areas. That's been the norm. It's always kind of been like that. When people migrate out of Wales and they go to university, let's say in England, or they go to work in England or other places as well, but it is predominantly in England, then there's also that they can continue to be activists outside. We've got a lot of people who are sort of digital activists as well, and who contribute to language activism in that way. And also there are people who meet to do some activism as well, face to face outside Wales, but a lot of the stuff is also bringing digital activism inside into language activism and so on. And then in rural areas as well, there are networked communities, even in areas that are sparsely populated. I don't know. Those were the questions, I think, weren't they? Oh, linguistic landscape. Okay, well, you do linguistic.
Gòrdan, do you want to say something?
I think Daniel asked about safe spaces, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think what has changed in the Scottish Gaelic context, thinking about the two projects where I did the fieldwork, but also more widely, is that although the speaker densities have declined, there does seem to be more internal confidence. I think it's a little bit related to what Elin was talking about when she quoted Desiree Gaudioso and Restanza, the idea that staying is not going backwards. We always had the issue previously that if you were a Gaelic speaker, you had to leave to progress. You had to leave the Highlands, you had to leave the islands, and you left your language on the shore when you came across on the ferry. That's changed a little bit. People want to go back. They want to go back to their islands. They want to go back to the Highlands. They want to stay in the places they came from, but they know that they need the infrastructure, the connectivity to do it. And those safe spaces, I think, are becoming a little bit more attainable, I think is the word. People understand that they can create them. It's also happening in urban areas where the speaker densities are very, very low, even if the numbers are reasonably healthy. Places like Glasgow, for example, which has around 1.5% Gaelic speaking, but maybe in number you're looking at 6,000, 7,000. And that cultural network is becoming a little stronger, even though if in relative terms it's still very, very low numbers. You have young people coming together to play football in Gaelic speaking clubs. So they're communicating on the pitch about something they're passionate about, and they know the opposition can't understand them. So there are all of these spaces being created where you can use your language, where you don't necessarily have to be a fully fluent speaker, but you can become immersed and connected and find your way into these networks and safe spaces. So things are changing, even though if it is still a very challenging situation in Scotland for Gaelic. But we also have to remember that we have other languages in Scotland that are minoritized or regional. So we have Orcadian and Shetland in the Northern Islands. We have Scots, which is actually very strong. Well over 1 million people speak Scots. I think it might be closer to 2 million in the last census, even though it is still looked down upon very unfairly, in my opinion. And the literary tradition, the poetry, the prose, where Scots once was incredibly strong, that has seen a revival, and it is becoming much more of a safe space to explore your own dialect from your own towns, whether that's Fife, Dundee, Glasgow, doesn't matter. So things are changing, but it is a little bit like turning an oil tanker around. It takes a long time, and it's a lot of effort. So we just need to keep pushing, and we need to keep supporting each other. All of these languages, for me, what's heartening about today is we are not competing. We are supporting each other. And it's the same in Scotland. We are not, as Gaelic speakers, competing with Orcadians. We want to see them build their language capacity and thrive. And so this is a very positive experience.
Thank you.
Marina, tu vols afegir?
No, I think that everything has been said. Actually, I think that the case of Catalan, it is a little bit different in the sense that when we, regarding safe spaces, when we build safe spaces, they are both for Catalan native speakers and for new speakers, because if you speak Spanish or other Romance languages, it is very easy to understand each other. But in the case of Basque or Welsh, it is different. Maybe you need some, like stepping stones for to become a confident speaker, and then to integrate in the safe spaces for native speakers. So it's just this nuance. In the case of Catalan, it is a little bit different.
And outside the territory, so for example, if Catalans go to Madrid, or if they go to, parts of Spain and so on, then do they organize themselves as well? I mean, for example, in response to your question, there is a primary school, a Welsh immersion primary school in London, right? And it's supported through, it's not supported by the London Education Authority, it's supported by the Welsh Government, but also with a lot of volunteers and so on.
Now they are beginning to do it. But for example, for the Galician people, Galicians, they have been migrants for centuries. And I could compare when I used to live in England, all the Galicians in Oxford, where I used to be, they were always all together, and they had their dinners and their cultural things. And with the Catalans, everyone had their own friends, and maybe we knew each other, but we didn't become friends among each other, and I think it is for a matter of tradition of migration. Now, I think that the Catalan people in the diaspora, they are beginning to organize themselves through casals catalans, for example, and that it used to be something more, so during the 20th century, for exiliated people from the Civil War, these kind of things, but not for modern migration. And nowadays, I think it is an intuition, but I think it's changing, and many Catalan people working in different places in Europe or in the United States, they are beginning to organize, but there's no tradition for it.
I think that Ibon also.
Yeah, I know we have to go on with the participatory session, but let me, this for Marina. So for the rest of the people in the audience, so Marina and Vicent have been contacted thanks to Monica, so that we could include in this forum actors' experiences that are not part of Work Package 4, right? So I think that your perspective on the work we have been doing is very interesting, not as an evaluator, I mean, but I remember the initial conversations with Marina when we started to talk about our cases and the context and the community projects, and your reaction was, okay, fantastic, but I'm the government. So the experiences I will be talking about are not, are not so that
not activism.
Project, so the project is a government project. However, that will be the question. So, did you see connections?
Sure.
This is not an exam question, right? Sorry. But
there are
your
reaction. The thing is that in Consorci para la Normalització Lingüística, we are more than government, like a public institution. So we are not supposed to be activists. Even most of us, we are also activists. But when we are working, we are a public institution. But in the practice, there are not so many differences between what can you be doing in other contexts. And this is why it is difficult sometimes in Catalonia and in other places, I think, like to you as a public organization or as an institution to involve some, when you try to involve some profiles of people, they will see you as the institution. Oh, they are the ones of Catalan. They want me to put everything in Catalan, and if not, they will find me for this. And we, from the Consorci, but this is why we are trying to make this community approach, and to in some ways, I think that this is my own opinion, that we have to focus on our role to guarantee the access of everybody to Catalan, so the access. All the more, more coercive things, I think that this should be something done by the government. But us, as Consorci, I think that we have to focus on this, on the community thing, on the guaranteeing the access, and to involve different people. But we are an institution, so only the name, Consorci para la Normalització Lingüística, it's a very long and institutional name. So we have to play, taking into account these circumstances. Our experiences, as I explained yesterday, I work here in Barcelona in the central services of Consorci, but we have 20 what we call centers of linguistic normalization all around Catalonia, with more than 100 offices in different villages, cities, neighborhoods. And my experience is that it depends. So the involvement of the community, it depends a lot on the people working in these different local points and in their on their ability to involve their environment and on their connections between the community, the society they are working with. And this is why, as Elin said, it is obvious that we are doing a social work, not a linguistic work, but sometimes we struggle in some ways to make this approach common for everyone. Many people see us only for the Catalan ones, no, the linguistic ones, and for us it is very important to make this social and this community turn.
Can I ask Marina something that you said, so that they think, or some people think, oh no, the Catalans are coming. Are they're gonna fine me for not putting stuff up in Catalan? Is that actually possible to fine people, fine businesses? I didn't think that you had the power to do that. Is it possible?
Yes, yes, in theory.
Okay.
But the thing is that no one has really clear who should do it. Okay. The city council said no, the Catalan government should do it.
Okay.
The Catalan government, no, the Catalan agency of Consum should do it.
Yeah.
And nowadays some city councils have started to do it because they have some competences to do it. And some of them have started to do it, but here it is a really like an uncomfortable thing because it could be like really violent in some way, and this is why. So I think that the law has to be there and it should be like put it in practice, but not for us, because our role is more like trying to implicate people and to involve people because they want to do so, because they want to use Catalan and to do it in Catalan, not because someone will come and put you a fine because maybe you have like the letter in Catalan, but then if you don't use it because you don't really like it. So it is a complicated question. It's with a lot of contradictions.
So it's difficult then to combine regulation and activism or impulsar l'ús del català. I can't speak any language.
Yeah,
I
understand you.
I'm languaging. I'm translanguaging. So.
Yes, it could be. And also the way of going to the shops. There are some experiences in some places where very activist people, they have gone to shops, and they use like a really aggressive, I would say, tone.
Yeah.
And our experience is that it is counterproductive completely, because people then get scared.
Yeah.
So I think that in Catalan we say mà esquerra, so like left hand, literally. So the thing to be to go there and to show the advantages of using Catalan, to have more customers, and then of course the law is there. But there are, I think, that other strategies that are more, they have more impact.
Yeah. I don't know if we can carry on this discussion.
I would say that Marina is right partly, but I really think that an important part of what is happening today in Catalonia, there are many factors, and we have already explored them yesterday with all these human movements, digital movements, whatever, but we have forgot that we had the law. And it has not been strong governments who has been, I don't know the word now in English, brave enough to make the law be followed, like in schools. we have a number of inspectors that should look for the accomplishment of the law. They haven't done it because it's something uncomfortable to do, because there is something mixed between collective rights and individual rights, and we don't have a very clear line of what is everything. And because we have the Spanish government and the courts looking at us, and maybe it should be worse, the impact of this kind of fines that in fact are the sentences, the jury sentences against the Catalan laws. But still, if we have the instruments and we don't use them, it's like they are useless. So
and it puts the responsibility on individuals and people to do it. If the government agencies or the official authorities are not doing it, then who has to do it? I think it's very unfair on individuals and on activists and individual people to have to take
Sure,
that
no,
role.
I agree with you. I was speaking about the role of Consorci para la Normalització Lingüística. I agree with you that the government should find, in this case, the Department of Language Policy. But our role in this kind of community projects, I don't think that the law has to be the first thing to speak about.
Of course not. No. Of course not, but it's a combination because the law was followed mainly, then the attitude of people would be also different. Because now it's like, well, if I don't do that, if I can say that I don't like this language, I don't want to use it because I don't, simply because I don't, and many people have the attitude, then you say, well, if you don't want, you have to, because you are living in a community that has given rules that have been passed in a parliament, and if we don't respect our institutions, what are we doing? So,
I think that, my view is that regulation and fines should be a separate role from the government or the institutions who want to promote the use and to make the environment more conducive. I think if you bring the two roles together, I think that's where it can be a bit complicated. Exactly. In our context, we have them together. The regulator has also functions to promote the use, and so it can lead to tension sometimes. Yes, to promote the use, but at the same time as well, it's the only body that has the authority to regulate. That means also imposing fines, in our case on public bodies, not on commercial private sector, if they don't comply with the linguistic legislation in terms of delivering services in a language,
Yeah, I think that the ideal scenario would be that the government says, okay, I'll fine you if you don't do this. And then the community projects, like, no worries, I'll help you. I'm here to help you to do this.
To have the instruments to help you.
Yeah.
I would like to mention that I've been learning in CPNL when I arrived to Barcelona, and linking to our sustainability and those questions. For me, it was important what you have mentioned, that our teacher was amazing, was in Espai Avinyó, because she linked our. Because I was a no-vinguda. I come here 5 years ago, and I started learning Catalan, and she was able to link my experiences as a Basque, because she knew Basque country, and the Catalan, and for me was a very safe space because I was new in this city, and for me was the first safe space in this city, was the CPNL, and I think for me it's very and I think we have to learn from these spaces in our different projects, because all of us have the same challenge with those changes. Here, maybe it's more intense in Barcelona, but in the Basque country we have it too. in this Ayeraldekon in our little community project, and for me it was very inspired. So maybe we can change to our workshop if you want to add something, or okay. So Itziar, eskerrik asko. So now we can make 3 groups or 5, 6. One group could be in Catalan, the other in Spanish, Castellano, and the third one in English, if you want. We didn't, or in Basque, we didn't know with the public. Yeah, English, Catalan, and Spanish, and we will try to answer collectively and discuss this question based on the guidelines presented and discussed during the workshop and our own experience of our communities, projects, etc. life. What practical recommendation would you give to communities seeking to connect both language revitalization and community sustainable development? So we can make the groups, start discussing. We will share some post-its to discuss ideas. We can write down ideas, move ideas, add ideas, and then the idea is to end up with 2 guidelines, 2 little or 1 guideline.
Yeah,